Hi, I'm Rabbi Alissa Wise, Deputy Director at Jewish Voice for Peace, and I'm excited to be in conversation today with Rani Allan, who was recently denied entry into Israel. We were hoping to do this conversation live on Facebook Live. The technology didn't allow. So we're recording this and we'll get it to you on Facebook as fast as we can. So since 1948, the State of Israel has been denying Palestinians access to their homes and ancestral lands. And that's the foundation for today's conversation. With the founding of the state, or as Palestinians refer to it, the Nakba, Israel forcibly displaced approximately 750,000 Palestinians. There are currently almost 8 million Palestinian refugees and internally displaced people. At the same time, the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement, or BDS call, from Palestinian civil society rests on three core demands of Israel: to end the occupation, to recognize the fundamental rights of Arab Palestinian citizens of Israel for full equality, and finally, respecting, protecting, and promoting the rights of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes and properties as stipulated in the United Nations Resolutions 194. So just this week, Israel's Interior Ministry released more details on how this new BDS travel ban that was passed in March by the Israeli Knesset will be implemented. According to the new law, there are 4 things that can get you banned: hold a senior level position in one of the organizations targeted, you're a key activist in the boycott movement, whether you operate independently or through one of the targeted organizations, you're an establishment figure, such as a mayor who openly supports a boycott, or you operate on behalf of targeted organizations. So when we talk about the new BDS ban, we can see that issues of Palestinian refugees, freedom of movement, and access to holy sites and ancestral lands are deeply intertwined. So I'm going to pass it over now to Rani, who is a Palestinian American student and organizer with the Palestine Solidarity Alliance of Hunter College, who could tell us a little bit about his experience this past weekend, where he was turned back the land crossing between Israel and Jordan at almost the exact same time. I and 4 other interfaith leaders were stopped from boarding our plane to Tel Aviv in DC. So Rani, tell us what happened.
Thanks for the introduction, Alissa. This Monday, it was my second time to attempt to enter Palestine. The first time, to give a brief explanation about it, happened in January 2015, where at the Allan border checkpoint, I was detained for 11 hours, kept there at the border, interrogated multiple times by different officers at the border. Then I was taken to a small room where 2 officers kept on screaming at me, banging on the table, searching through my cell phone, and asking questions about emails I had on my cell phone, who my friends were. They searched my contact list, and any Palestinian number was questioned about. It was 11 hours through this experience, and I wanted to try again. I said, maybe if I log out of my email, maybe I'll have a better chance this time. Maybe if I change my passport, I'll have a better chance. So I got a new passport, and time was kept for 5 hours. And in the beginning, I was questioned about my connection to the homeland. Do you have any relatives in Palestine? As soon as they check my name, they get suspicious. They question me about my father's name, my grandparents' name, where my father and my grandfather were born. And at one point, the officer asked me, where was your grandfather born? That's when there was this kind of tension between me and the officer. I didn't want to tell her Palestine because I knew if I say the word Palestine, it's going to get me in trouble and I won't be allowed in instantly. So I told her Israel, and she had this look on her face, and she asked me, where in Israel? And at that point, I wasn't comfortable anymore to give more details about my grandfather, so I just told her I don't know. But I felt from that moment that I'm now a threat to them. All the questions that I was asked resembled on my ancestry, my connection to the homeland. And in fact, as soon as you enter the border, they just look at your face, they look at your name on the passport, and they assign you a sticker. And they circle a certain number on the sticker. And that determines how long you will be questioned for at the border and how much of a security threat you're going to be treated as. So I was assigned this number, and it's in Hebrew, so I'm not really sure what this means based on their security system. I was kept there for 5 hours this time, and I was questioned for another time. About 3 hours in, the head of the immigrations was questioning me about who I'm staying at, how I know this person. When I told her that I know this person through a mutual friend, she even questioned me about this mutual friend, how I know her, where does she live, what does she study. And then about half an hour before I was actually denied, I was interrogated for just taking notes on a notebook. I was bored and there was nothing to do. I was also anxious, so I said, but I knew I shouldn't write anything political because I had the feeling it will get interrogated. And eventually I was questioned about it. What are you writing? Why are you writing? We want to see what you're writing about. And it made me feel that even my right to express my thoughts, my right to freedom of speech is not even allowed by the Israeli occupation system. Eventually, later on.
Calling from now? Where are you calling from now?
I'm at my grandparents' house, and I have my younger cousins here. They always like to be around me, and they like to give me a hard time.
Where is your grandparents' house?
It's in Amman, in Jordan. Yeah, so before I explain the story of my grandparents, I was eventually told that I am denied entry, that I'm banned entry into Palestine, and they just handed me the letter, and the letter said due to illegal immigration considerations. I have no idea what that means because I am not trying to enter Palestine illegally. I'm here at the official checkpoint. But the officer, when she handed me in the paper, she told me, you looked and sounded suspicious, without giving any details, without giving any explanation. And I mean, given the first questions centered around my family, it was clear that I was denied entry because of my ancestral heritage, because as a Palestinian, I posed a threat to the Israeli state. They don't want people from Palestinian ancestry whose grandparents were forced to flee from their homes come back to Palestine with a different nationality. It's basically you asserting your own identity once again.
So what happened to your family in 1948?
So with my family in 1948, like many other Palestinians, like the other 750,000 Palestinians, they were kicked out of their homes. I remember my grandparents telling me that Zionist militias came banging on their houses, and asks them to immediately leave. I remember relatives even said, "We don't want to leave. We want to stay here. We have nowhere else to go to. Where do you want us to go?" And they didn't care. The Zionist militias, they just told them, "You either leave now or we're going to shoot you." News came around about the Deir Yassin massacre, where a number of Palestinians were murdered, brutally murdered, and my grandparents became afraid of that happening to them. So I remember my grandfather, he told me, he just walked barefoot. He was 15 years old. He just walked barefoot from Palestine to Jordan. My grandmother, she flew to Jerusalem for a while. She then fled away actually to Jericho, and then she went to the refugee camp in Jordan. And it speaks to you about the experiences of Palestinian refugees. My ancestors had nowhere to go to. They were just forced to walk barefoot, forced to flee from one area to another, as a result of the ethnic cleansing, as a result of the violence they faced from the Zionist settler colonialism. So my grandparents have been here since 1948. In the case of my grandmother, it's been since 1958. And yeah, my family lives here, and that's the story of that's their story.
And so you said that you were denied, this is your second time being denied in recent years, but have you been to Palestine before?
So I've tried to enter twice, actually, and these were the only two times I tried to enter. And as you know, during both of these times, I was denied entry.
So you've never been back to your ancestral homeland?
I've always wanted to go. I've always dreamt of going back. You have no idea how much it means to me. It's very meaningful for me to just visit, just to walk inside, see the villages of my grandparents, and this dream has never been fulfilled as a result of the Israeli ban.
And what were you hoping to do on this trip when you would try to enter on Sunday? What were your hopes for what you would do inside Palestine?
I had a wish to go arrest meet with human rights organizations. We had a tour being planned out, myself and about 12 others. We wanted to go to Haifa, we wanted to go to Akka, we wanted to go to Jerusalem, the West Bank, meet with students from Birzat University. That was our plan, and for me it was all about, I mean, the most meaningful was about entering Palestine and walking there, walking inside, breathing its air, and getting to connect with the people inside. It's a strong, meaningful way to affirm our identity as Palestinians when we connect with the local population there.
Of course. And it sounds like you weren't asked about your boycott, divestment, or sanctions involvement activity during your questioning. Is that right?
No, I wasn't. There was no mention about my activism. There was no mention about BDS. Although I do remember during my first time when my phone got searched, they accessed emails of SJP, and they just asked me, what is your affiliation with SJP? That was the only time when any activism was actually questioned about. But it seems like the larger threat wasn't about my activism. The larger threat was a descendant of Palestinian refugees is trying to enter.
So can I ask you a question about how this new BDS ban, right, that was just passed in March and it's now starting to be implemented. It seems this past weekend when we got denied in DC. But DEAL, which is a Palestinian human rights organization that works to promote and defend the rights of Palestinian people, specifically those who have been displaced and the refugee population. So they wrote a statement about the denial where they said, Israel's evolution from denying the right of return to the almost 8 million Palestinian refugees and internally displaced peoples to denying entry to official and sanctioned international representatives of the UN, to denial of entry to any and all who promote a just and durable solution to the plight of the Palestinian people bears serious deliberation, to say the least. So what do you say about that? How do you see the connection between, or do you see a connection between Israel enacting this BDS ban, so not allowing people like myself and the 4 others denied with me on my interfaith delegation from going in because we work for justice for Palestinians? How do you see that connected or not connected to the denial that you experienced?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely connected. Israel, I mean, since its establishment in 1948, has been relying on exclusion, basically. If you're a threat to whether it's the demographics they want, even the political opinion, you're instantly excluded from the population. That's the premise of what Israel is, based on its settler colonialism. So when it comes to people who support Palestinians, I mean, in the beginning, it used to just be banning Palestinians from returning back to their homes. Now they kind of extended this ban because they see the growing support happening. So now the threat is not just Palestinians, it's also those who pose a political threat to them, regardless of the identity, regardless of their background. If you oppose the political premise on which the state operates, then you're also a threat to Israel. So it is absolutely connected. It's all about the Israeli practice of exclusion.
So for those who might hear about this BDS ban, it might have somewhat of a chilling effect, right? It might make people, for one, be hesitant to be involved in boycott, divestment, and sanctions work. It might make people want to cancel their trips to the region. What do you say to those people who might be listening about what you hope they will learn about BDS and about the struggle for liberation for Palestinians?
I think it's always important to prioritize Palestinian voices, prioritize Palestinian refugees. It's great to visit Palestine, of course, and it's great to support the local people there, resisting the occupation and living with it. However, when it comes to being denied entry, when it comes to being afraid of even not being allowed entry, I think the focus should be on the Palestinians who, since 1948, have not been allowed to enter. And the Palestinian refugee issue, unfortunately, it gets not mentioned as much as other Palestinian issues do. You often hear about the West Bank, the occupation there, the illegal settlements in the West Bank, but little do we hear about the Palestinian refugee issue, where you have right now over 5 billion in refugee camps alone, with limited resources. So I think the main point when it comes to entering Palestine should always connect back to those refugees and essentially about the right to return.
So for people who are wondering what now, what do you suggest people do next as they hear this news and are appalled to hear that a state that claims to be a democracy would deny entry to you, to me, to others who would like to visit just because of what they believe and what their political actions that they're taking for for justice and liberation. So what do you think people should be doing now in the wake of this new BDS ban, and as we come to raise the profile of Palestinian refugees and of the ongoing assault on Palestinian people under occupation? This week we've seen a lot of what's happening around Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. And so what is your hope for what those of us in the United States would do?
There are multiple ways. First is BDS, of course. The BDS ban is a sign that BDS is actually working. Israel wouldn't even care about BDS if it didn't actually pose a threat. In the beginning, 10 years ago, they just ignored it. Right now, they're taking it very seriously. They're taking it as a major attack on Israel. So that's a sign that when people see repressive acts, such as denying activists from entry, it's a sign that you have to continue supporting the oppressed population. You have to keep on opposing the oppression, especially at this critical moment until this oppression breaks loose. So BDS supporting the organizations on the ground. There are multiple organizations, whether it's Badil, whether it's Al-Haq, whether it's Al-Qaws, the Palestinian queer organization, whether it's Adala in 48, to donate to these organizations, to support them, whether it's financially or mobilizing support abroad for them. That's another way. Also, it's working with the refugees, with limited resources. In Lebanon, there is an organization I once worked with called LEAP, Learning for the Empowerment and Advancement of Palestinian Refugees. It's a very useful way to go and engage with the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon and offer them just a small amount of support. Definitely on social media, sharing videos, sharing posts from Palestinians. There are people in Gaza who keep on writing about their experiences, their families' experiences. We want to uplift these voices. We want to make them heard. So definitely sharing on social media and using the platform to uplift Palestinian voices as well.
Wonderful. So for those listening, there's actually another opportunity on Sunday. The interfaith delegation that I was supposed to be on, are still on the ground. Most of them got in and are on the ground now in Palestine. And we're going to be having what we're calling a virtual delegation on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern time, with Feiruz from Grassroots Al-Quds, Grassroots Jerusalem, which will talk about the situation on the ground. And you can see for yourself what the interfaith delegation that Israel is so afraid of is on the ground doing. So we encourage you to join that virtual delegation on Sunday. It's to register, go to USCPR, which stands for U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights. So uscpr.org/virtual delegation. Rani, it was really a pleasure to speak with you, and I'm so very sorry that you were denied again access to your homeland, and I hope that soon in our day you'll get to go there and we'll maybe even get to meet up there together.
Hopefully one day all of us, Palestinians, Jews, Christians, Muslims, all of us can go together and celebrate our diversity in Palestine.
Inshallah.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today.
It was really a pleasure. Enjoy your cousins and your grandmother. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.